In 1768, a royal decree from Paris introduced a new tax on buttons. Every button on every coat and shirt now carried a price beyond its cost. To ministers in gilded halls, it seemed clever, but for the people, it was a nuisance, an intrusion into daily life. A tailor sighed as he added the cost to a new waistcoat. A mother hesitated before buying a shirt for her child. Quiet grumbling soon turned to anger. The button tax became a symbol of the crown's greed and distance. Across France, the feeling of injustice spread. The tax was small, but the fury it sparked was immense. A tiny button had become the spark. France was ready to ignite. The crown didn't collect taxes directly. Instead, it outsourced the job to the Fermiers Généraux, a private group of wealthy financiers. They paid the king for the right to collect taxes, keeping anything extra they could squeeze from the people. These men grew rich, throwing lavish parties while the people suffered. Their agents, the commis, enforced the tax in markets and streets, searching goods and fining anyone who broke the rules. Locals saw them as traitors, despised, feared, and utterly isolated. Every new tax fueled public rage, deepening the divide between the people and the agents of the crown. In La Rochelle, tensions simmered beneath the salt air. On a bright morning in May 1769, two tax agents stopped a young sailor, Pierre, over his old coat's unstamped buttons. Pierre refused to pay the fine. The argument grew, drawing a crowd, fishermen, merchants, townsfolk who shared his anger. When the agents tried to seize Pierre, the crowd erupted. The city's resentment boiled over into riot. Tax offices were stormed, hated documents burned. The smoke signaled a line had been crossed. When royal troops arrived, they found a city unbowed, and a spark that would soon spread. News from La Rochelle spread quickly, traveling along France's trade routes and waterways. In Amiens, weavers and dyers, hit hard by rising costs, took to the streets, burning an effigy of a tax collector. The rebellion soon bled into the countryside, where the tax was felt just as deeply. Church bells rang to warn of taxmen, and villagers vanished from the streets. Reports of ambushed agents and violence reached Paris. What began in La Rochelle had become a nationwide pattern of defiance, with the countryside now a hotbed of resistance. Not all resistance was violent. A quieter but equally powerful rebellion was taking place in the nation's fashion. As the tax on buttons became more hated, people began to look for alternatives. If buttons were the problem, then the solution was to get rid of them. Tailors and seamstresses, always creative, began to design garments that did not require buttons. They rediscovered old techniques and invented new ones. Shirts and vests were designed to be fastened with intricate systems of cords and laces. Coats were held shut with elegant metal clasps or simple hooks and eyes. The button tax had inadvertently sparked a fashion revolution. This change in clothing was a form of mass protest. It was silent, but visible everywhere. Walking down a street in Paris or Lyon, one could see the evidence of the rebellion. Fewer and fewer people wore clothes with buttons. To wear laces or clasps was to make a political statement. It signaled one's opposition to the tax. It showed solidarity with the protesters. The new style became a badge of honor, a symbol of defiance against an unjust government. It was a way for ordinary people to participate in the resistance every single day, with every garment they wore. The government could tax buttons, but it could not force people to wear them. The trend spread through all levels of society. It started with artisans and the working class, who were most affected by the tax. But it was soon adopted by the bourgeoisie and even some sympathetic members of the aristocracy. To wear a buttonless coat became fashionable. It was a sign that one was enlightened, that one cared about the plight of the common person. The fashion magazines of the day, which normally focused on the extravagant styles of the court, began to feature these new button-free designs. The silent protest of the people was becoming a mainstream trend, much to the dismay of the royal treasury. The economic impact was significant. The demand for buttons plummeted. Button makers who had initially supported the tax thinking it would secure their trade were now facing ruin. The royal workshops that produced the official stamped buttons had no customers. The fermiers généraux saw their projected revenues from the tax evaporate. They had counted on the necessity of buttons, but they had underestimated the ingenuity and stubbornness of the French people. The War of Wardrobes was a brilliant success. It showed that the people, when united, had the power to undermine the government's authority, not just with riots, but with quiet, collective action. The resistance was not limited to the streets or the tailor shops. It also took a more formal, institutional shape. Artisans' guilds, which represented tradesmen like tailors and clothiers, began to organize. They wrote petitions to the king and his ministers. They detailed the economic hardship the tax was causing. They argued that it was destroying businesses and hurting families. Merchants' associations in major cities did the same. They warned that the tax was disrupting commerce and breeding disrespect for the law. Even some local courts, known as parlements, began to voice their opposition, issuing official remonstrances against the tax, questioning its legality and wisdom. This institutional support gave the resistance a new level of legitimacy. It was no longer just a collection of angry mobs. It was a coordinated movement with a voice. The petitions and remonstrances were carefully written. They used the language of loyalty to the king, but they carried a clear message of defiance. They argued that a good king would not wish to impose such a burden on his loyal subjects. This was a clever strategy. It allowed them to criticize the policy without directly attacking the monarch. It framed the issue as a matter of justice and good governance, making it harder for the crown to dismiss the protests as mere lawlessness. Alongside these formal protests, a flood of illegal pamphlets and political cartoons appeared. Printed on cheap paper and distributed secretly, these documents were the social media of the 18th century. They were often crude, angry, and satirical. They depicted the fermiers généraux as bloated monsters devouring the wealth of the people. They showed the king as a fool, manipulated by his greedy ministers. One popular cartoon showed a Frenchman being stripped of his clothes by a tax collector, who was meticulously counting the buttons. These pamphlets named names and simplified the complex issue into a clear story of good versus evil. They fueled the popular rage and spread the spirit of rebellion. The button tax also caught the attention of the era's great thinkers. The philosophers of the Enlightenment, who championed reason and individual rights, saw the tax as a perfect example of arbitrary and irrational government. Writers like Voltaire and Diderot in their letters and essays used the button tax to criticize the entire system of absolute monarchy. They argued that taxation without representation was tyranny. They asked why citizens should surrender their property to a government that did not serve their interests. The button tax, a small and seemingly trivial issue, became a powerful symbol in a much larger debate about liberty, justice, and the proper role of government. The government's response to the button tax crisis was confused and harsh. Troops were deployed, curfews imposed, and hundreds arrested. But for every protester jailed, more were radicalized. Public executions made martyrs, not examples. The tax was a disaster, costing more to enforce than it brought in, damaging the economy. Ordinary people refused to comply, and the system began to break down. After 2 years, the government capitulated. The button tax was repealed, a stunning victory for the people. The cracks in the old regime were revealed, foreshadowing a revolution yet to come.